Good morning, church family, and happy Juneteenth. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Pastor Rick, you're a day late. Juneteenth was yesterday, and today is June 20th. And technically, you are correct. Nevertheless, I wanted to talk to you about Juneteenth today for two reasons. Number one, because I didn't send out a devotional yesterday. And number two, because inasmuch as this year Juneteenth fell on a Sunday, that means that today, Monday, is the day that we're celebrating it. Hopefully by now most of you know the story of Juneteenth. This day is actually the oldest national commemoration of the ending of black slavery in America. It commemorates how on June 19, 1865, Union Army Major General Gordon Granger sailed into Galveston, Texas, and realized that all the black people there were still living in slavery. And so he issued a public proclamation. He told them that the black slaves are now free, and have in fact been free for 2.5 years, because the Emancipation Proclamation had been signed on January 1st, 1863. And while this Juneteenth announcement was made freeing all slaves, it's more accurate to say that it was the day the slaves were told they were free, not the day that they were freed. That would take many more painful decades of discrimination and persecution. When slave owners first heard this announcement, most didn't tell their slaves until after the harvest was finished. And for the slaves who tried to act on their newly announced liberation, many were caught and hanged by their white owners. As I was thinking about that, it caused me to think about the difference between a proclamation of freedom and the actual realization of that freedom. Nearly 25 years after the Emancipation Proclamation of the cross of Jesus, Paul wrote to the Roman believers. Some of them still didn't understand what it meant to be free from sin's bondage. They thought they could go on sinning because they were under grace. Paul challenges them with the question, well then, since God's grace has set us free from the law, does that mean we can go on sinning? And then he answers that question and says, of course not. So Paul reminds them of their status in Jesus by appealing to a familiar fact. He tells them that whatever we submit to becomes our master. Jesus said it this way. He said, I tell you the truth, everyone who sins is a slave of sin. The other option is to be a slave of righteousness. Salvation actually means a change of bondage. As we once served sin, we're now committed to live lives of righteousness because of the freedom that Jesus provides. And I pray that as those who follow Jesus Christ, we might become in practice what we already are in status, free. And I also pray for our nation, that as we remember Juneteenth, we'd remember that this is a day that has its roots in the Emancipation Proclamation, and that that's a document that was written with the promise of racial reconciliation. But what's written in a document doesn't always work itself out quickly within a nation. And so I pray that this day might provide an opportunity for us to engage in conversations that would help us to consider what we can do to realize the ideals upon which our country's been built. Amen.